And we are recording now. Hello, boys and girls, cats and dogs. We are an inclusive channel around here. And look who I have with me. This is Hunter, who is known as Pitchfork Fiber. He does some of the most beautiful hand-dyed yarns you have ever seen. And most people know that I am very fond of some other hand dyers, but I mean, I just became acquainted with Hunter and he is amazing.
Well, thank you.
So tell us everything about yourself.
Well, I appreciate you having me on today. Like you said, my name's Hunter. I am the dyer behind Pitchfork Fiber. And Pitchfork Fiber is, relatively new in kind of like the timeline of dyeing. I've been dyeing for a long time, but actually haven't really been dyeing for sale up until about a year ago. I started right at the beginning of 2021. I kind of had some unfortunate events, so like got laid off from my job, and then with COVID and everything, it just kind of like continued to pile up, and so I kind of decided to leap into dyeing yarn and trying to see if people would be interested in it. And I've been so surprised at how much support I've had from people all over the US and the world. And it's been really fun. But I actually started dyeing. I learned how to dye yarn, I guess I should say, in college. I got a fine art degree in art education, and then I had to kind of pick two different proficiencies that I took the bulk of my course load in, and those were ceramics and fibers. And so from there, I just like kind of started taking fibers classes because it was something I had always like wanted. I loved the idea of taking nothing and making something from it. So I learned how to dye yarn and weave and screen print and all these really fabulous things. And so from there, um, I realized like, oh, I love knitting, I love to crochet, I love all these things. I could save so much money if I did it myself, to be honest. And it ended up being awesome. I started dyeing my own yarns and using it primarily for myself. But here we are now, and it's so cool to see things that other people make with my yarn. That's like the best part of, I think, doing it, is seeing how creative other people take something that you create, but then seeing how they interpret that and make it into their own is just so cool. So
Now, I really admire people who have that kind of expertise with visual arts. I've never thought of myself as having that sort of thing. I have an appreciation, but not a whole lot of knowledge.
mhm.
And I never really thought I could execute anything until I started, you know, creating crochet patterns. Uh,
It's so cool.
so yeah, my best friend in college, she was an art history major, and the stuff she knew, I just could not imagine. But at the same time, I was a music education major, and I wanted to be an opera singer.
Hmm.
And sometimes people um, don't really get how much depth there is in music as well.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, um, we became acquainted because of Gary Boston,
Hmm.
who is doing this End AIDS knit along, crochet along, and he chose your yarns.
Yes.
And I think it's wonderful. I think, didn't he do my shawl in your yarn?
Yep. He did your crochet pattern in the peony colorway, which is this really beautiful tonal, kind of peachy,
Mm-hmm.
warm tone, undertone, like peach color. And it looks spectacular with the kind of with the different crochet pattern texture. I think it looks like truly stunning. I don't crochet as much as I knit, and to see my yarn, in a different way, with the different
Mm-hmm.
looping, and it's just totally different than the way knitting, captures my yarn. So I was really just
Send
thrilled.
me some yarn, I'll show you what I can do with it,
Yes, yes.
yeah. But, yeah, it's, I think Gary is wonderful, for
Yeah.
one thing. I think this project is wonderful, and I think your yarns are wonderful, and I'm really glad that we were introduced.
Yeah, no, it's isn't it fun to see how something as kind of, I wouldn't say silly, but, like, yarn to me is very important, but in reality, it's just like a material, and how you can really, create friendships and, meet people in so many different spaces and parts of their life over a shared interest. I think that's, like, the coolest.
Exactly, exactly. It's not brain surgery.
Yeah,
We're not feeding the hungry,
mm,
but at the same time, we're doing some pretty damn good work.
yeah,
And we are, a lot of us, um, most of my work gets donated,
mhm,
honestly. I want to keep people warm.
totally.
Um, Go ahead. I'm
I
sorry.
would no, I just that sentiment reminded me today, of someone I saw on, I forget who it was, someone on Instagram just the other day. They own a yarn shop, and someone came in looking for a scarf because they were cold on the just like on the street. And the idea of just like being able to give someone something that could really like help them, seems like a simple gesture, but the thought of, someone had to make that and someone created the pattern, and I don't know, there's just so many layers to this that, some that people don't necessarily think of when becoming a fiber artist or some, I think there's a difference between, the intent of creating something and wanting it to be out in the world, and then just like, because you could go to a store and buy a crocheted scarf, or like, that, and I just feel like there's something so personal about bringing yourself into that, like into the world through what you make.
Exactly. I agree completely. I mean, I it might not be immediately uh, perceptible, especially to someone who needs a hat to keep warm.
Hmm.
But there's love
Hmm.
in every hat, and I did hat on hate last year. I'm doing it again. I'm also doing dog sweaters for pet rescues,
Oh,
and
I love dog sweaters.
oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
I want to say I'll have to see some.
We'll talk offline
Yeah.
because I'm going to have an announcement about that in a couple of weeks. Um, but it's the love, and you don't get that from a machine in Taiwan.
Hmm. Yeah.
You well, on the other hand, you get slave labor, and you have to be sympathetic
Hmm.
for that. Not slave, but very poorly paid
Yeah.
labor, and you have to be sympathetic there.
Hmm.
But um,
There's something
fiber,
special about it.
it's true. Fiber contains love.
Hmm. I went to grad school, for museum and exhibition studies. I kind of took the like art and turned it into more of a institutionalized way
Hmm.
of educating, the general public, I guess. And my thesis was actually on quilting, so it was a little different, but it was about kind of the politics of quilting and how important the actual like quilt is with the people who make it and with the ideas and why they make it. And I think there's a very common theme with knitting as well, and crochet, where you the time, the effort, the labor of creating something is as important as the end result oftentimes, because when giving someone a present of a hand knit sweater or a crocheted hat, that takes so much time and effort, and the amount of kind of repetitive, like almost meditative love that you put into that is something that you can't replicate in another way. um, and I don't know. That's why I think some I mean, this is maybe a little shady, but not everyone for me is knit worthy. I say that often, but like if I know someone's not going to appreciate it, it's hard for me to put myself into something and then it not be received with kind of or reciprocated.
I completely agree. Friends have shared with me stories of giving things, um, knit or crochet items that they put a lot of time and talent and sometimes money, because yarn's
Mhm.
not cheap,
Mm-mm.
into, and then the next time they went to visit, they saw it in the dumpster.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've had scenarios where I've gifted something to a family member and yes, they might appreciate it, but it's not the way that I feel like it should be appreciated or should be loved. And then that's
Mhm.
not their fault. That's just, my perception of the way they should care or think about it.
And on I hate to defend those people, but they often don't understand.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's just a it is truly just like not you're not on the same page. And so I do think it's really amazing when you find those people who you can give them something and they're going to
Mhm.
cherish it, and that in itself is, I think, more wonderful than giving them the thing at all.
Exactly, and, right now, I have in mind, as we're talking about gifting, I'm thinking of several friends who have just loved the items
Mhm.
that I gave them and shown me amazing appreciation for them. And I, um At one point, I used to be in the opera world. I know some famous people, and at one point, I was trying to, send them stuff, get them to post pictures and credit me, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Um, one of them did. She's a really, really beautiful woman, and she posted a picture wearing the garment that I gave her.
Oh.
Oh my god, I was so flattered.
Mhm.
Did I get any pattern sales? No. Did I get any, YouTube subscribers? Probably not, but, oh my god, it meant the world to me,
Mhm.
and, that's the sort of thing that means more. I mean, YouTube subscribers come and go, pattern sales come and go, but, um, love? Well, actually, that does too, but, um it's a little more steadfast usually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I mean, especially during, I don't know, we've just gone through the holidays, the winter holidays, and, I love making things for people just because it's something I like to do, and if I can
Mhm.
cross off a gift for someone that I can make myself, that's always, like, a big bonus, and
I'd rather do that
yeah, absolutely, and I
'cause,
know
frankly, I ain't got no money. So
exactly, but you have the skills and the love to make something, and I think that that's where, um, s people like us who do that, I think if I receive something that someone's made, like, that means so much to me because I understand, you know, the opposite of gifting it to someone. So, this year I made my brother, a jacket because I love to sew. I've been very into, like, learning and kind of teaching myself how to draping and, drafting patterns, and
Mhm.
there's just something so, again, so cool about
I might have seen a picture of that on your Instagram.
I think I posted one. I was trying to keep it, like, on the low because I didn't want him to see and then think, but he has a very extravagant style and, doesn't necessarily have the money to back that up. And I thought, "You know what? I'm going to kind of recreate something that he'd wanted." So, it was very fun to see him open that and be so excited. And also, I mean, it took me forever. Like, it took so long that I was like, "You better wear this." Because it took me, weeks of making and patterning, and that's not an easy feat, especially when I, like, don't really know what I'm doing, but I don't know, it's so fun.
Yeah, I've had that experience too where, to make a gift, I had to learn a few new things,
Mhm.
and it took time, and I don't regret learning those things, and they've been valuable. Um, in my experience, I didn't see the level of appreciation that you say you got from your brother,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, um, so let's talk about your yarns.
Yes.
They are so beautiful. Now, what fibers do you like to use the most?
I mean, I love to use wool. I think that that's kind of what, drew me into kind of the, like, luxury aspect of yarn and dyeing. I mean, pretty much up until college, I didn't even understand that there was something beyond just buying yarn from, like, a craft shop, a craft store like Joann's or Hobby Lobby or something like that. Like, I didn't have that concept, and so when I went to school, we were learning about, merino wool and different types of cellulose and protein fibers, and um, that was really cool. Like, I learned that there's a difference between cotton and linen versus, alpaca and wool. And even within that, they dye very, they absorb dye and different types of dye techniques very differently. So I think from there, I really loved working with primarily animal fibers. So right now, I've been experimenting with some different ones, but I mostly dye with merino wool, both superwash and non-superwash, and then alpaca. I've been loving alpaca lately. I have some. Let me show you some here. I have a couple skeins of alpaca that are just so fun, and it's so soft. So here's just some skeins,
Oh, I love those colors.
and these are
Uh,
just a couple that I dyed up, and they're so fun. I dyed a I don't know if I have it here with me, but, it's fluffier. Everyone was using mohair for a long time, or it was often in a lot of patterns. A lot of people
mhm,
it became very trendy to use, and I, was experimenting with it, and I found that mohair sometimes was kind of itchy, and I was looking at different alternatives to that, and this alpaca is so soft because it doesn't have, like, the kind of wiry fiber that mohair does. It's a lot more, like, fluffy. So
mhm,
this is my, plume base, the Pitchfork plume base, and this is 50 grams. You get 328 yards, so it's a lace weight. It's
mhm.
beautiful to be, held with another yarn. I've seen people hold this double and just make something, but it's super soft, and I've been loving that. I have some fun colorways. I'll show you a couple new colorways that I just dyed up just for fun.
Excellent.
Yeah, this is a new colorway I'm in love with. It's like a very golden. It's a
Ah,
little. It's very golden. I love this color. It's super fun. Are you knitting with a similar color?
this
Oh my
is,
gosh.
um, this is I used to call this the sweater that would not die
Oh my
because
goodness.
it took me so long to complete it, and then in the end, I didn't like it and redid it, but, the pattern is now on Ravelry. But this is, like, really, really cheap store brand yarn,
I love
but
the color.
I the color is, similar to what you had in your
Mhm.
hand just a second ago, yeah.
Yeah. It's
But,
so fun.
I would love to learn more about fiber, and it sounds like you have a great deal of knowledge there. Recently, I was doing some research into, environmentally friendly yarns,
Mhm.
uh, and, um the budget yarns that we all know, and some of them are nice and some of them aren't.
Yeah.
Most of them are environmental disasters.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where, learning more about what you're making with, I think, take if you're spending I always thought if you're spending hours creating something, wouldn't you want to enjoy it and know that it's good for the planet, good for, sourced appropriately. It's treated
Hmm.
appropriately. All these things are like I think as I just became more invested in creating and fiber and also more knowledgeable, it became more of an importance to me and kind of in choosing the way I buy. I'm not saying that knitting with acrylic yarn you buy from store is bad by any means, but there's a different process it is taken to create that yarn out of a
Yeah, acry-
plastic.
acrylic comes from petroleum,
Yeah.
and it's made with petroleum. So the at the same time, you have to find a balance
Hmm.
because not everybody has the budget for natural fibers.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I mean, I
especially
certainly don't all the time,
yeah.
but so there's a balance there. I try my tastes over time. I've said this many times. My tastes have become more elevated.
Mhm.
My budget has not become bigger.
Yeah. No, and that is something I think that's what drew me in when I first started getting more into the fiber community was I was watching these people knit with gorgeous $35 a skein yarn, and they were making sweaters that needed 8 skeins, and I'm like trying to do the math. How are you pumping these out constantly? Like that's really really expensive.
That's $280 of yarn.
Yeah, think about that. And then, like as I was in college, I didn't have budget to go spend money. So that's where I think dyeing, that's what I mean, truly, that's why I started dyeing my own yarn was because I couldn't afford all the yarn.
Yeah, exact. Oh God, I wish I had that skill.
But
I
it's really interesting because now that I understand that, I think that there are times for those really, gorgeous luxury pieces that you are gonna splurge on, and you're going to, it's like a thoughtful. You've made an intent to make this something special. I think that there's
Mhm.
something different than just, you know.
And actually, if you think about it, in a department store, a luxury department store, someone would pay $280 or more for a really nice sweater.
Oh, I am constantly because I'm very into fashion. I love seeing what's trendy and on the up and coming, and I follow a lot of designers that there are sweaters that are 20% wool, 80% polyamide, or whatever the term is in different fabrics that are
Mhm.
$500 and $600, and it's not necessarily the brand name that's making it so expensive. It's that, it's a knitted sweater or it's, Fair Isle, and they just bump. I mean, the prices are astronomical. And then you think, you're really paying for a lot of times the construction technique that it's used to create that. If it's not just like seamed up with the sewing machine, but also, I would much rather wear a hand knit garment that's a third of that price out of beautiful yarn that's been sourced equitably or appropriately
Mhm.
than support. Not that that's bad, but I think that there is a perspective of thinking about, oh, you could buy something that's pretty darn luxury. If you were to get the same in a designer label, it might be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So
Yeah.
um,
I think I have to introduce you to a new friend of mine who works in fashion.
yes, I would love.
Um, he's um, uh, he's working for a knitwear designer now, and went to school for design. A perfectly lovely young man,
Hmm.
um, in more ways than one, and he's so. We'll talk about that
Yeah.
offline because he's so nice. Anyway, um, yarns, colors. Do you have favorite colors, or do you just go as the spirit leads you?
That's hard. I do have favorite colors. I am definitely more of a warm toned person. I like the I love browns and rust and oranges and yellows. Like I really like those warm tones. But I really do love all colors, and I think when it comes to dyeing, I did an hour long workshop about kind of creating a color palette about a year ago or so, and it was really cool to talk about building a color story. And because I have dabbled and worked slightly in graphic design, and with graphic design it's so important, like the colors you choose really do make a difference. It means something.
So, excuse me a second. That's a workshop you created?
It was like a one-time thing. I did it with
Is it available online?
I I don't have the rights to it. It was like through a different streaming platform. But
Oh, okay. Then
Yeah,
because I wanted to make it available to our viewers, but
yeah,
if
I don't, but you know what? I think I would love to talk about it more, whether if there's ever an interest on it, because
even if it's well, we should create something then.
yeah, we could create something, absolutely.
But even if it's a third party link, if you want to send it to me, I'll include it in the description.
Yeah, I don't have it at all, which is
Okay,
too bad.
that's okay.
But it was cool just to talk about color and to hear from other people, and kind of, I think
Hmm.
a lot of times when knitting or crocheting with a need for multiple colors, that's where sometimes you can kind of get caught up in like what's going to look good. And I think that through picking, thinking about color in a story and a feeling and emotion, it goes back to color theory and all these different, kind of basic level things. um it
That's
really does.
another thing I'd love to know more about.
Yeah, so it's really cool. I'm very lucky to have the art history and the art education background I do, because I really truly use it like every day. The things that you learned in elementary school, painting and whatnot, like I really do use those concepts and those ideas,
Hmm.
to create colors. So for example, like a color like this, is not just yellow, it's not just brown, it's a solid, but it has a lot of layers of colors. And so to get this color specifically, I used yellow, I used green, spearmint, blue, a little bit of red. Like there's all these layers that go involved to create one color. And I think that understanding that is to dye is really important, but then also looking at a color and figuring out what it's going to look well next to is also important. Like if I were to pick this blue color, I think
Uh-huh.
these look really pretty together because they're both kind of in the same.
Reminds me of Cub Scouts.
It is kind of Cub Scouts, like the kind of khaki and the denim almost, but they have similar like hue value in a sense. If I paired this with this bright aqua, this is a kind of jarring, and it's totally
Mm,
different. So
yeah. I
learning how
mean,
to
yeah.
this is kind of wild. Now, would that make something cool? Like I think it would. I'd recently knitted uh, something with two super crazy colors. It was a mitten, and I think it came out so fun because of the colors and how unique they are together.
I love that.
So this is just like I think it's Skein Knits like Selbu mitten. Pretty simple, like thick yarn.
Uh-huh.
But what I think is so fun about this is the choice of color and how unique they are. The one is kind of like a bubblegum pink with like lavender and yellow hues, and then the
Mhm.
background color is just like a pretty classic teal. But I think the way that they combine together is very interesting and cool and kind of trendy, but it's not jarring when you look at it. I think they're different. So I like to use Photoshop to create mood boards. I use Pinterest. I Pinterest a lot. I love to create boards of kind of inspiration from random things. And I compile those, and when I create a collection, most of my um, almost almost always my yarn is released in collections. So it's like between 5 and 7 or 8 colors that all really work together. There will be, often there's darks and lights, there's neutrals, there's pops of colors, but together they really are harmonious, and that I get that just because I'm like really intentionally thinking about how the colors play together, what the mood
Mhm.
is that like what is the mood of this color story. Um, so yeah.
I love self-striping yarn. I love the random nature, when you're making something.
Yes,
Right now, I have a bag full of Lion Brand Mandala, which is, like, my favorite,
I love seeing.
store
Mhm,
brand yarn. No, it's
mhm.
not store brand, but it's my favorite
Yeah.
production yarn. Somebody gave me a bag full of it, so I'm making a big project that is meant to be totally random because it's all self-striping, and
Mm.
it was like 20 something cakes
Oh my god.
of 20. None of them were the same colorway. It was all different. So, I mean, when I'm done with this, I can't wait to see it. I have no idea what it's gonna
Yeah.
look like.
That's so fun though.
It is. It's tremendous fun. I mean, this is the latest P oops, sorry. I'm apologizing to you because I picked up my hook wrong. Anyway, this is the latest piece that I'm working on.
Oh, how
So
fun.
it started out in yellow, but then we're moving on to another, so it's gonna be a bunch of tiles,
Oh,
and I'm gonna
fun.
piece it together. Um, I can't wait to see how it turns out.
I love that's another thing. That's like I don't know, not a resolution. That's like a goal I would like to work on. Is that often I pick when I have a project, I pick colors and I like I execute what I wanted because I'm that kind of controlling Virgo where everything has to be so I don't know that's just like how I create oftentimes is I have an idea, I think about it, and it's very intentional. But there's something so fun about the randomness of making where whether it's like you said, just self-striping, who knows what you're gonna get. Um, or if it's creating them all and then laying them out and then being excited at the end with what the end result is like I really want to do that. I There's a lot of people do that and then they hold together like they'll knit with random yarns but then hold another yarn together that's the same throughout, and so it adds a level of so if you're taking
Mhm.
two strands, one is like crazy always changing and then the other is a solid color or whatever. And
Yeah.
the way it brings some unity, but I think there's I don't know, I really wanna make like a sweater or something out of it. I think that'd be so cool.
I love the random nature of self-striping yarns.
Mhm.
At the same time, I have 2 sweaters that I completed in the past few months that are very deliberately color controlled with 2 different solids.
Yeah.
So, there is a balance there too. Now,
Mhm.
when I talk to people who are, um, knitters, crocheters who create garments as opposed to you doing yarn more
Mhm.
than the garments. I ask them usually, are you yarn first or are you pattern first?
Ooh, that's a great question. I definitely am more of a, I think, pattern first. Because yeah, I'm definitely more of a pattern first, but I also sometimes am like a color first, if that makes sense. Like I look at I love wearing color. I
Hmm.
happen to be wearing the most like basic color now. Yeah, look at you. I love color. Like here's some, I mean, color all around me. I love it. But I often will look at, oh, I haven't knitted a large project with purple yet or with pink, and I want to knit with that. So I think, oh, what would look good in all over purple? And then I kind of think about patterns or about what kind of yarn. I don't often have a ton of yarn for myself on hand. That's another thing is I my stash is really just scraps, and then I think mostly because of budget, I just don't like hoard yarn or have a lot of it unless I'm gonna
Now,
sell it.
another dyer friend of mine, doesn't use his own yarn for his projects. He uses budget yarn
That's
because
it's
his
yeah,
own yarn is expensive.
it is. It's
It
expensive.
really is.
And
And honest, let me show you. This is some of his yarn.
oh, beautiful. I love that. Who is that?
His name is Daniel. It's Paw Ply Yarns. Well, let me show you the label.
Ah, beautiful. I love those colors together.
The Paw Ply Yarn Company. And he and I created this colorway together. Guess what it's called?
What is I wanna see it.
It's called Ginger Bear.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
And he only did it once. And so I've had it for a few months. I think
Mhm.
he did like 12 hanks. I could only afford to buy two.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm finally using it. It's been
Mhm.
a few months. I wish he would do it again because it did get bought up.
Yeah, it's a
People
beautiful
bought it,
color. Mhm.
isn't it? It's got the oranges and the pinks and the purples, all the things that I love.
Beautiful. I love a purple, pink, orange combo. Like, that's so fun.
Okay, hold on a second. This uh, this is what
Oh,
I'm working on with it.
and how fun is the pooling of the color, like, how it's, melts together? That's
I
so cool.
love accidental color pooling.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never done planned color pooling.
Yeah, I don't
I
know how
don't
that works.
I mean, some people can do it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not one of those people. Um, I could learn it,
You
but,
could, yes.
I've got other priorities.
No, I think there's I love that. I definitely have bought like, I went to Canada, months ago, for a wedding, and I was like, I don't, like, need anything from Canada, but I thought it'd be really fun to bring home a sweater quantity of some sort of Canadian yarn, whatever that was.
Mhm.
That's gonna be my gift to myself, and I bought this really, really, woolly red, like, pretty scarlet red, yarn, and I was like, I want this to be almost like a something that you could wear in the snow. Like, I was thinking of all the I think see, I often think, "Oh, I wanna wear this, like, snowshoeing in the fields." Like, that's I think of a whole fantasy that goes with it. So that is one time where I bought yarn first, and then I looked for a pattern to go with it. Um,
And, I can see you in that color. I think it would be brilliant.
yeah, I love red. I wonder if I have the yarn. I don't think I have the yarn around me, uh, but
I
it's really pretty.
Yeah, I was recently gifted with some. I went to oh, have you ever been to a fiber retreat?
I have no, that is
There are men's fiber retreats. They're all men.
mhm.
So, this year I went to two of them, my first fiber retreats ever. But at the most recent one, I was gifted with, or basically it was a door prize that I won somehow, five skeins or hanks of hand dyed yarn in the most beautiful deep red
Mm.
color, and I can't wait to make something with it. I just haven't decided what to do.
I know sometimes I have those special skeins where I don't know, like, I dyed one that I really liked. Let me see, like, I think it's this one. I dyed a skein just, like, randomly playing around that I thought was
Mhm.
really fun, and it's all
I
just
like that.
it's just speckles. It was a different technique that am used to, but
Mhm.
it really is just, like, crazy colors everywhere. It ended up
How
being
does that work up? Have you done anything with it?
I
Or
don't know. I've not played with it, but I'm thinking I was like, I really like it. I think this is beautiful. I don't even know if I could, like, replicate it exactly because I
how
tried.
much of that do you have?
I have 1 skein of this. This is in DK, and then
Okay.
I think I have 2 skeins and
Well,
1.
again, I say send it to me and I'll show you what can be done.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, yeah, what was I gonna say? Oh, what about yarn dyeing accidents? Are there things that you regret, things that you would not do again?
Yes. I think I've learned there's a few things I've learned just dyeing. I mean, for the most part, I again, that Virgo energy, I'm pretty I like know I have a plan of what kind of color I'm going for. I pick out the colors that are gonna, execute that well, or at least I think so. But then there's times that I'm just playing around and I come up with ideas. Like one of the first times I was dyeing with the alpaca, I thought it was going to dye similar to the merino wool, where when you put the color on, if it's variegated or whatnot, it pretty much just absorbs in that spot. With alpaca, it's very different. It absorbs at a much slower kind of rate, so things get a lot more kind of muddied, which can be beautiful. I put the most ridiculous colors together, and it came together to be like a swamp green that in the end I thought was like hideous, and then I thought about it again. I was like, "Do I like this?" Like, I didn't know if I liked it or if it was just so hideous. Anyways, but I dyed a lot of skeins like that, and I thought, "Oh no, how am I going to save this?" Because, like, I don't wanna waste like, cannot stand wasting yarn. If I have something I don't like, I'll over dye it. I'll, like, play around until I get something cool, and that is actually how I got this color. This is really funny. I had a skein in this color. This was one of my first this is Alice.
I love that.
And this was like a mishap skein.
Uh-huh.
It's supposed to be a lot more purple, so
Mhm.
this is how it's supposed to look, and it just, like, didn't really turn out how I wanted it to.
I can see those 2 working so well together.
They look gorgeous together, and I actually really like this color. It just wasn't
Mm.
the vibrancy I was going for, and so I was like, I don't know if I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, but I over dyed it. I had 2 skeins of these. I over dyed it in orange, and I got this. And so
I like that
this
too.
is the base that I started with, and then I just over dyed it in an orange
Mhm.
because I wanted something to match a coat I had. So this is the, Thunder and Lightning Thunder Shawl by Stephen West, and
Everybody loves Stephen West.
yeah,
Everybody who knits anyway. I don't
yeah,
knit, it's a mystery to me.
yeah.
Um, but everybody loves his patterns.
There's something about I think he really has an understanding of something that's fun that will keep your that's either easy where you can just like I mean I'm sure like you have those certain patterns where you're knitting and every time you look down there's a mistake because you weren't following it exactly and it just is like hard to follow.
That's the shawl I was showing you because it takes a lot of focus. I can't
Yes.
do it when I'm doing YouTube.
Yep,
I
or
have
watching TV or anything like and I think with his often with his patterns you'll do it a few repeats and then you start to be able to read your knitting or crochet
mhm.
whatever and it becomes really mindless even though it isn't necessarily the most easy technique or pattern or whatever so I really like that and I think they're unique, they're fun, they're not oftentimes they're kind of kooky and wacky designs which is I think is super fun and great so
Now, do you do your own designs?
not I haven't really in the past, and that's something that, I think taps into a very it takes a very different type of side of my brain,
Mhm.
and I don't know I often modify patterns quite heavily,
That's how I got started designing.
but I have not designed and I don't know if it's that there's a comfort when you look at a pattern, it gives you cast on this many and it's going to most likely it's going to fit or I think that's where I have hesitations where I don't I could swatch and figure out the math but by that time I'm like I'd rather just knit another pattern so
Here's the secret. Use inches instead of stitch counts.
inches instead
Yeah. Tell people, make it measure this.
oh
Whatever they have to do.
to make that. That's really smart. Yeah, see, and I think that's where, I see people write patterns that are like so, I mean, effortlessly easy because they give you the exact stitch number. It's like everything's laid out in front of you, and I personally like that because it's then so much easier. But thinking of doing that from scratch is like, oh my god. And then to size it up or down, I mean, I guess like a shawl or something that could just keep growing, or you could stop whenever, would be
Yeah,
one thing.
exactly. I do a lot of shawls, and you don't. Nobody cares about gauge.
No, no.
Nobody cares about size, and most of my shawls, you could stop at one hank and it's a scarf,
Yeah,
and
love that.
you could do three hanks and it's a shawl.
Yeah,
You know, um, but again, inches.
I like that. I need to
I
write that.
go for inches. And coming out of my mouth, that sounds a little inappropriate, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But, um, uh, but, you know, um, I always I learned this lesson at one point. Um, I don't know why I was doing this. I was making clergy stoles, the ones they wear
Mhm,
that it looks like a great big long scarf.
mhm.
And I found a pattern because I wanted to reference the size. The pattern writer said, "First, measure your priest." I've met some priests I wanted to measure, but that's a different story. But, I mean, that's what we're going for. So I always say measure against something that fits today.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so it's interesting to say that because, like, if in any pattern drafting in non, crochet or knit, if you're making something, like sewing something, you're measuring, you're not going off of, you know, how many stitches on the sewing machine you have to go. You're going by how long or how wide or whatever. So it
Mhm.
makes sense that you would do that when creating a design or pattern. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely would. I love when people, like, I love to see what other people do. It's so inspiring. I don't know if I have that innate ability yet. It's something I could work on.
I think you do, but you don't have to do it today or tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, so, I mean, it took me a long time. It took
Mhm.
me a long time to start doing YouTube, you
Oh, yeah.
know? It's when you're ready. The
Mhm.
world is gonna be there.
Yeah, I think that was a big I mean, I'm sure I'd love to hear your perspective on this, like, when you started YouTube, but when I first started dyeing yarn, I think there was a huge, um a lot of people say, "Oh, I just started one day and I just started and it whatever happens happens." And I think that there's often a lot of that on social media and things, but when I started dyeing yarn, I was like, "Okay, if I'm going to invest a little of my own money into this, like, I want to make sure it works." And so I had a lot of hesitation of starting. I think that what I look back on, I think that's so silly. Like, I shouldn't have held myself back.
At the same time, that was preparation time.
Yes, exactly.
And I mean, we all have those doubts. Is it gonna be good enough?
Yeah.
Is anybody gonna want it? I mean, my very first video, which I later deleted, was, I think it was called, "Does the World Need Another Crochet Channel?"
Yeah. And I
And in the end, I said, "Let's find out."
mhm. I think there's something about I think there's something about that. Um, I think about I followed a lot of makers' journeys over the years of
Mhm.
when I was just a follower, and to see their journey of starting and succeeding or failing, and where they are now, or where I followed a lot of people that no longer are makers. They don't, they're not doing anything, maybe in at least in the public or social media sphere. They probably are on their own, but then I've seen other people, like, I mean, I remember being friends with some people like a few years ago that were like, I don't know if I even want to create an Instagram page, and now they are like thousands of followers, creating amazing content that's like really cool, and people want to watch and follow and create along with them. So it's just, I don't know, there's something about it. I do think there is space for everyone in the yarn kind of fiber world.
Exactly, exactly. And um, I'm sure you found this. I think the yarn community is amazingly warm and
Mhm.
welcoming and accepting. There's very little judgment. There's very little harshness.
Absolutely.
Um, and I don't see that. I mean, I watch automotive videos.
Mhm.
You know, those guys are not nearly as nice as yarn people.
No.
I mean,
No.
it's still fun to watch, but it's not the same.
Yeah. I was, when I feel like I have, like, lived so many different lives, but I was a competitive diver for a very long time.
Really?
Yeah, I was a platform diver for 15 years or so.
Okay, dude, you gotta send me pictures.
Yes, I have, I don't have any with me, but it's been a while, but, yeah, I was a diver, and I was around, like, that sports culture, which I've even in the sport of diving, which is in itself a very inclusive sport, or very accepting, but even the difference between, I felt like I had two different sides of me. I had this very creative side where I was also getting, meeting people and befriending them and following them, but then I also had like a very separate side of myself, which was competitive and athletic and whatnot. And it's been very cool to see how, as I've gotten older, those have been able to, or at least I've felt that they can merge more, because, like the yarn community, people are very accepting, and they don't, it doesn't matter like what you've done. But I've also been surprised with some of my friends. I kept because I have a personal like Instagram that I just use for personal things that doesn't really have anything to do with yarn. And then I have my yarn Instagram. And I was afraid of people like finding my yarn Instagram for the longest time. And it's so silly because I was very proud of the things that I had done and the accomplishments and what I'd been making, but I didn't know why I wanted to keep those separate. And then it wasn't until really recently, to be honest, probably within the past year, that a lot of people that I knew before yarn, before knitting and everything, were like, "This is so cool. Why didn't I know about this earlier?" And so I've been surprised kind of on both fronts. Um,
Then, of course, you must be a huge fan of Tom Daly.
yes, Tom, so I'm by no means as good as Tom Daly, but we've dove in the same competitions a few times.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh my god. I'm not worthy.
no, no, no. No, Tom is very, I thought it was so cool, to see like someone who is so popular in their sport, in their identity, just everything, highlight knitting and crochet, and making in such a way that was like very cool and people wanted to get on board with. Like, I don't know, there was something that I think he did, which was elevate making in a way that people of it as like, wow, that's really cool. It doesn't have to just be like what other people, whatever
It's
people
not
think.
what grannies do.
Yeah, and if it is, like, that's still really cool because I mean, that's the thing that I think, there was always a stereotype around, especially being a male and knitting or crocheting and making, um, whether good or bad. But I just think it's so cool to see someone kind of flip that on its head and be subversive and reclaim that and be like, yeah, I
Oh.
actually am really good at this. And I don't know, there's something very cool about it.
I think, yeah, I think that's great. I've often told this joke. Many people have said to me, "I've never seen a man knitting before," and I would say, "You still haven't, because this is crochet."
Yeah. And you're right. And when people are like, "Oh, are you?" I do think it's very funny when people, well, as makers, we know often a lot of us know the difference between knit and crochet. And I love when I will go online and I'm looking at a shop, a store. It says this crochet top, and you're like, that is not crochet. Whoever wrote these descriptions is actually quite incorrect. I don't know. It's just kind of like maybe my sassy inner being like, no,
You sassy? Who'd have
yeah,
thought it? Yeah. I mean, many, 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 many years ago, when I was an office temp in New York City, um, I worked in the office of a big name designer.
Oh,
I
really?
didn't want to go there. I said, I'm sartorially challenged. I can't go there. Um, and I was also very heavy at the time. And there was some sort of a magazine thing um, that featured a crochet bikini.
Oh, wow.
It was not in the product line. It was not in any fashion show. People were calling up all day long for that thing.
Oh my gosh. Isn't that crazy?
It is. And I mean this was what 1997,
Mhm.
but yeah, that was long before I picked up the hook.
I
But
know. And now I think there's something and, I think there's in doing research for my thesis in quilting, it kind of parallels a lot of crochet and knitting as well. The idea of, like, returning to this we think of our generation thinks of our grandparents as, sitting and knitting and it being this, like, very old, boring thing, but I think there's been this, like, resurgence in finding something that's, like, it is very cool, and people have reclaimed it as an art form, or a hobby or whatever they self-describe as being, I don't know, there's something so hip and, like, now cool about it, like, I see
mhm.
oh, I mean, probably weekly, I see a friend who I don't that's outside of my fiber world, wanting to learn to knit or like starting and I think, "Oh my gosh, like that's so cool." How, I think there's something about it being a thing that's now like I don't know what a good comparison would be, but I just think it's something that lately has been
Well, it's interesting, and it's also true of men doing yarn. But since you mentioned trends,
Mhm.
and trends always ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Um, so do you think that yarn will recede in people's mentality or people's perception?
Hmm.
And when do you think that will happen? And then how long will it take for it to come back?
Wow, that is a fantastic question. I've never thought about that, but I think it probably will. There are people like myself and I'm guessing you that will always be making, always will be using yarn and creating.
Oh God, no. Yeah, I couldn't be without it.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's always those people that are going to do it. I mean, think about how long crochet and knitting has been around for like
Mhm.
centuries um
Think
people
of Madame Defarge.
yeah. I mean, there's people that I just think that there will always be here, but I think in the sense of being trendy or I do think it probably will go in and out. I think just like just like yarn and dyeing trends as well, like there are trends all the time. You look I mean, talking about the mohair,
Oh, I can't
no
keep up with them.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, no I mean, 5 years ago, no one would have ever knit with I mean, I never would have thought of knitting with mohair or holding it double or, like, even holding yarn double, I felt like was not a thing, and then all these patterns started coming out with yarn holding double and fading and marl and, all these things that are trendy. They do go in and out, like, not everyone's marling things like they were 5 years ago or whatever. Um, but I think that just like yarn dyeing, I think there will be people that will always stay true to that. I would love a trend that I would love to see be more popular that I think doesn't get as much credit from a dyer perspective is natural dyeing. People that dye with natural materials, it is so like they often are very eco conscious and are dyeing with practices that are extremely um, sustainable. They are sourced oftentimes like incredibly, they're sourced from the farmer down the yarn comes from the farmer down the street. They're helping sustain this ecosystem. Um,
Avocado pits or coffee grounds
yes,
or
avocado
yeah,
or yes, exactly.
yeah, and, I know some YouTubers who do that.
Yes, it's fascinating. It is, like, so crazy how you like, it's completely different than dyeing with, like, how I dye with,
Mhm.
different acid dyes. Um, I would love to see that become more I would love to see that become more of a trend, not even trendy, but just have people learn more about it.
Y More widely practiced.
Why yes, exactly. I
Yeah.
think there's so many beautiful dyers that dye with cabbage peel and with with rust and with all these different mordants and things
Mhm,
to create,
mhm. Exactly,
elderflower
yeah. I
and then
mean, I would love to go very deeply into the technology of dyeing, but I don't think we have
yeah,
time for that. That's, when I click end, we can keep talking for hours and hours and
yes.
hours when I stop recording. But because I want to learn
Mhm,
about that sort of thing. I've never done it, and I've been afraid to do it.
mhm, and that's the thing is, I have people ask me all the time in my DMs, like, "What do I do if I wanna start dyeing?" And I by no means want to gatekeep any information. I feel like there are, I might not necessarily tell you how to what yarn, what dyes I use to dye a specific colorway, but I don't want to be that kind of gatekeeper of knowledge of yarn dyeing because really if you have the tools, anyone can do it. I mean, you can dye with with Kool-Aid. I mean, you can dye with food
I
coloring.
was gonna mention that a lot of people start with
Yeah.
Kool-Aid,
Yeah, because you can use food,
and it's got the acid built in.
Yep, there's all those things that you can dye with that I did too. So I think people should not be afraid to do it. I mean, I don't know, you can go on, I know Knitpick sells bare yarn. You can go to Joann's and buy some 100% wool, white.
I have a hank of this is another question about spinning. I
Mhm.
have a hank of hand-spun yarn
Mm.
that was gifted to me, and it's
Oh,
undyed, and, the way it looks now, it would be beautiful if I worked it into something,
mhm.
but I've been afraid to touch it because
Oh,
I've been afraid to dye it.
yeah, I would be afraid. Excuse me, that's another huge, I mean, that's another thing is spinning. Like, I have dabbled in like drop spindling in school, but other than that, I've never done that. And I mean, talk about another layer to the making or creating process if you spin your own
Yeah.
wool.
Do you watch Fiber Spider? He
I've heard of
is
them. I don't watch them though.
okay. Yeah, he amazing crochet teacher.
Okay.
At the same time, he has gotten into spinning,
Mm.
and so he has demonstrated some of that as well. And he was the one who gifted me with that yarn that I mentioned.
Oh, it's so
And
special.
he's really a lovely guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I there's so much I want to learn about, but at the same time, I also want to sit and crochet.
Yeah.
I wanna write, I wanna make YouTube content. There's so much to do.
Yeah. It's fun. I find myself being so inspired by this community so often that it is almost like overwhelming because
Mhm,
every place you look, there's someone doing something really cool that you want to support, you want to join in, you want to do it too, like you want
mhm.
to explore yourself. Like there's so many things that happen, and like it really is so fun, but it can be kind of a lot. I mean, I find myself creating content is takes so much time and effort that people don't necessarily see, and that's a goal I've wanted to try to get better at, but it's like, "Oh my gosh, when do you do it?" Like, it's just there's so much to
Yeah,
do.
and we haven't even talked that much about social media,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you have a presence there.
Yes, I
Um,
do. I mostly use Instagram, that's kind of my go-to place, but, you can follow me at Pitchfork Fiber.
mhm.
And, I like to post. I love I love photographing thing. I really like that aspect of the yarn dyeing and making.
It's a
Um,
very visual thing, so it lends itself to
Totally,
photography. Yeah.
totally. I love, when I dye my yarn, I take a lot of time and effort in making sure that when you see it on your computer, it is the correct color, and I go through all that process. So um, that that's a part I enjoy. I really do enjoy that, and I love
Mhm.
coming up with new ideas of how to display my yarn or highlight it. And like just as you do with your YouTube videos, I mean, it takes a lot of planning and preparation. Um, a lot. Not It's not always just a whim that I do something. So yeah, it's sometimes can get exhausting, but it's so fun. In the end, it's so fun and it's exciting, and I enjoy it a lot.
That's cool. I think it's wonderful. I love what you do. We're recording this on January 6th, which is Epiphany. And looking back on the past year, um, what accomplishments would you call your greatest?
Mm.
And looking forward to the coming year, what do you want to achieve?
Oh, that's great. I mean, biggest accomplishment is definitely starting Pitchfork Fiber. I started it February 1st of 2021, and I'd had my Instagram running a lot longer, but actually selling my yarn, dyeing it, really diving into it, I've been so overwhelmed with um, the outpouring of support from all over that I mean, that's been such an accomplishment. And every time someone makes something with my yarn, it really does inspire me to do more, create more, everything. So that's definitely been a huge accomplishment in 2021. As for the future, I would love to, I mean, being realistic, I'd love to try to make my dyeing process, the whole kind of like business side of like going from dyeing and photographing and shipping. I'd love to make that more efficient. Right now, it's kind of like I do it whenever I can. It's kind of piecemealed together, and I'd love to kind of work on that because that is a huge, thing. I dye in my kitchen, which also then is where I cook food and eat. So I don't have a separate space. So all of that kind of adds to having to be really mindful of when I'm dyeing. Also, my boyfriend, he doesn't like when yarn is just strewn about drying everywhere inside. So things like that. I'd love to get better at coming up with a process that works. Um,
So in the future, then, do you see yourself like doing the stuff that you love to do and
mhm.
really do well, and then having somebody else do the business side?
I mean, that would be really cool, but I like the business side. I think I would like to try to I mean, of course, I'd like to scale my business more. I just hit my 250th sale um a week ago or something, which for me was
Mhm.
really exciting on my Etsy. So I do have an Etsy, and that's another thing I'd love to maybe have my own website. Um,
I'll post all of your links in the description.
awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah. So
Um,
all these things I think will add to that being, just I kind of started and just went for it, which I'm very happy I did. But I think that now that I'm in it and I'm doing it, there are things that I can work on to just make it easier for me to keep creating. Because right now it oftentimes is like I have to really think about like when I'm going to do each step, and I would love to just be able to do it willy nilly whenever I feel like it, but I don't
mhm.
have the space or the ability to do that. So,
Yeah, exactly,
but
exactly.
no, yeah, those are all. I love that you asked that question. That's exciting. It's exciting to
Yeah,
think about the future.
it is. It is. I mean, I wasn't always excited to think about my future, but
Yeah,
since I'm doing this now, I sort of love it.
yeah.
Um, well, we've been recording for over an hour now. I want to just, um, I'm going to remind people again about Gary Boston's um, knit along, crochet along called End AIDS Cal,
Uh-huh.
Cal, if you will. I'll include a link to that as well in the description, um, in which Hunter's yarn is featured, and there are some really great pictures of my shawl pattern worked up with his yarn.
Yeah.
Um, and then, is there anything that you would like to tell the world before we stop recording?
Yeah, I mean, I am excited. I've been working on a new collection that hopefully will be released the very beginning of February. I'm excited about that. I've been working on, knitting up some samples. I've been working on like fun colorways, and so I'm excited to see how this has had more preparation than some of the past collections. So
Mhm.
definitely keep a lookout on my Instagram there, and you can follow my newsletter. I like to send out kind of info every week or so on there. That's all can be found in my bio on my Instagram. But yeah, I'm excited, and just getting to talk with you, spreading love and joy around the fiber community is always so enjoyable and exciting. So any new
Totally.
people out there, please send me a DM, say hi, tell me that you found me here, because I love to know where people.
I would love that. I would love for your followers
Yes.
to find me as
Yep.
well.
Yes, it's
Um,
reciprocal.
exactly, exactly. So if you're a follower of Hunter and found me that way, then let me know too.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm gonna click end record, but stick around.